Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/PettyRevenge. In today's episode, Revenge on Trespassing Hunters. Don't mess with my dog. Left his debts here, UK. Revenge in the making against the ex. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Revenge on Trespassing Hunters. My parents purchased 6 acres of farmland back in the early 70s. They had built a house at the front of the lot and had started to plan construction of a small barn further back when fall came. One day, my mother comes running into the house yelling about a bunch of crazy people riding snowmobiles and carrying guns through the backyard, right up next to the house near where a toddler, me, was playing. Dad comes out. The hunters insist that they've always come this way, and what's the big deal? Dad explains that this is no longer fallow farmland, and that they need to find a different route. They say no way, see you tomorrow, and drive off. This repeats for several days. My dad, who does not suffer fools lightly, proceeds to dig out a deep, narrow trench across a good part of the edge of the property with the backhoe. He then hauls every bit of the summer-ripened manure pile from his 4 dogs from the foot of the property to fill the trench. Dead leaves and a decent dusting of snow camouflage the hazard. The next morning, the snowmobilers come roaring over the property line and slam headfirst into the trench, leaving their snowmobiles vertical, well and truly stuck. Plus, of course, everyone and everything is covered in rotting dog poo. My dad stood by watching, coffee in his own trusty rifle in hand, while filthy, smelly snowmobiles were winched out of the trench by filthy, smelly snowmobilers. Unsurprisingly, the hunters did find a different way to their hunting grounds after that. Don't mess with my dog. I like to think of myself as a pretty understanding person, unless you mess with my dog. I lived in the same house for 6 years, 5 of which were uneventful. New neighbor moved in behind me. One day, my roommate calls to tell me she pulled my dog in because the guy behind us was yelling at her, ripping fence panels off my fence, etc. Apparently, my dog was barking at him like mad, but when called, she immediately ran into the house. When I got home, I inspected the fence. I could fit through the hole, and my dog was 50 pounds. I walked over to their house to talk. When they didn't answer, I left a note to call me. He called and proceeded to tell me how my dogs were tearing apart the fence and my girl was aggressive. Like Bra was taunting her and opened a human-size hole in the fence for her to jump through, and she didn't go through, but she's aggressive. This pretty quickly escalated to him saying he'd beat its head in with a shovel. I like to think I have decent Googling skills. So I got to work. Pulling up his felony records over the previous 5 years was pretty easy. At that time, finding public property records was a little more challenging. I got my evidence together. I also had a friend build me a new fence on that side with cameras. Then I had a casual chat with the across-the-street neighbor who talks to everyone about the violent felon who had been allowed to move in. I found his landlord and called him to have a chat. When he said his property management company was supposed to be doing background checks, I sent him the assault, drug, and other charges with links. At that time, I also had some contacts in the prison and parole systems, so guess who found his parole officer for a chat about said violent felon harassing his neighbors and attempting animal abuse. Finally, while all of this was in process, he had a party with friends in his yard. He thought it would be a good idea to start banging on my new fence to harass my dog again, then holding up his 7-year-old against the fence, crying about how aggressive she was. I started screaming about him being a violent felon out on parole for the whole neighborhood to hear until they all went inside. I got verification of the talks had with the landlord and parole officer along with the extra precautions neighbors took after seeing what he'd done on record. I'm sure you can imagine the impact on his whole family. You come after me, we can work it out. Come after my dog, and I'll destroy your life. Left his debts here, UK. I bought my home 3.5 years ago from a couple who were divorcing due to the husband's philandering. He hasn't registered his new address with his credit card, car loan, outdated council tax, unpaid bills, etc., so I've had multiple collections agents banging on my door looking for him. He must owe thousands by now. The collection agents have been aggressive with me, threatening/trying to enter by force and take my car to pay his debts. I've never even met the guy. He hasn't updated his address with the DVLA/DMV equivalent, so also has 2 separate letters from the police, I guess for motoring offenses, which will render his car insurance invalid if he hasn't declared them. UK law says I can't open his post, so I have to wait until the collection agents come to the door before I can deal with anything, but I always allow them a couple of visits because they will charge him extra for each time they come to the door. Plus extra charges for all the warning letters. So his debts are just going up and up. After a couple of visits, I refer them to his new address, which I got from his very happy to help ex-wife. I can't bill him for my admin services, but I can still cost him money. I'd love to see his face when the letters/collection agents catch up with him. Revenge in the making against the ex. This is a story of my friend, Fred. He'd been married for 20 years. Takes wife to anniversary dinner at an upscale restaurant, whereupon she informs him she wants a divorce. This was typical behavior for her. Instead of waiting for a more appropriate time to break the news, she decided to do it in the middle of the fancy dinner where lots of people would witness Fred's dismay and embarrassment. Always lots of drama with her. A self-entitled, spoiled. Fred took it rather well, all things considered. They weren't getting along and found out later she was having an affair. He did multiple things to attempt to make the divorce easy, including creating a complete itemized inventory list of all belongings, made her a copy, and asked that she check off what she wanted. It started out acrimonious, but it soon became the divorce from hell. Her demands became more and more ludicrous, and the attorney fees kept increasing. So, he eventually caved in and agreed to her every demand. Fast forward about 18 months later. The divorce is finalized. During this time, Fred has met another woman. They get married shortly after the divorce is done. The ex-wife shows up one day and is in tears. The man who she left Fred for has dumped her. Fred and his new wife are gracious and console her. Fred is a nice guy and is polite during this, but he's still harboring a lot of resentment. This starts a weird relationship. Ex-wife started calling Fred and the new wife just to talk and would even drop by on occasion. During one phone call, in which she asks to borrow some money, Fred brings up the funeral plots he had purchased when they were married. He offers to buy her plot instead of loaning her money. He knew she'd never pay it back anyway. She agrees, but demands a crazy number, 20 grand? Can't remember. Fred is livid. He's had enough of her. The revenge. Fred stewed on this for a while, and then a fortuitous opportunity came along. The stepfather of the ex-wife died unexpectedly. The ex despised him and had nothing to do with the man. He'd divorced her mother years ago. Fred liked him though. Even went to the funeral. When speaking with the other family members, he learned that there were no pre-planned funeral arrangements and money was tight. Fred stepped up and donated his funeral plot for the burial. This is the plot that is beside her funeral plot. The one she wanted to sell to Fred, which he already paid for. She refused to attend the funeral, so she doesn't yet know about Fred's generosity. Now it's a waiting game. One day, she'll find out. Fred grins like a baby who just *T his diaper every time he tells of his deed. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.